The boring history for sleep. The surprisingly cozy lives of Ottoman coffeehouse patrons. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the creaky wooden doors of an Ottoman coffeehouse just as the sun sets over the domes of old Istanbul. The cobbled streets are cooling under your sandals. The muezzin's last echo hasn't quite faded, and you're drawn toward a warm yellow glow and the scent of roasted beans that could probably stand up and argue with you. The soundscape gentle clinks of ceramic hushed voices, the soft scrape of a lute string being tuned, and then that unmistakable hiss of water hitting hot metal. Welcome to the kind of place where caffeine meets conspiracy and gossip gets filtered slower than the coffee. You probably won't survive this. Not the coffee, it's fine, but the politics, the poetry battles, the backroom dice games, yeah, good luck. Ottoman coffee houses were basically 17th century Twitter threads, chaotic, addictive, and possibly being monitored by someone who wants you to stop talking about the Sultan's latest tax blunder. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge off the dusty lane and push open the wooden door. It's a modest, low-ceilinged room lined with hand-woven rugs, long benches, and low tables that seem just a bit too small for anyone with Western knees. But no one minds, because here in this warm, smoky haven, time itself slows to a gentle murmur. You're greeted not with words, but with nods, men seated in small huddles, their faces softly lit by hanging oil lamps, the smoke of their hookahs curling like slow thoughts into the air. A boy with an ewer offers to wash your hands before coffee. You accept. The water's warm, the towel smells faintly of rose. Your fingers now clean, your heart still dusty, you sit. And almost immediately, a copper chesve is set over hot coals behind the counter. No espresso machines here. Just patience, finely ground beans, and a technique older than your great-grandmother's best secrets. The smell of cardamom drifts through the room. Someone hums a tune. Someone else coughs delicately into their sleeve. The coffee comes thick and black, served in a small porcelain cup set into an ornate brass holder. You take a sip. It's strong enough to give your shadow a caffeine rush. In Ottoman society, coffee wasn't just a drink, it was a social passport. Rich or poor, janissary or scholar, you could claim your place on a cushion, order a brew, and enter the daily buzz of street philosophy. Historians still argue whether this democratizing effect helped ferment modern political thought or just fueled hours-long debates over whether plum tobacco was better than clove. Next to you, a man with a deeply lined face recites verses from memory. They fall from his lips like smoke slow curling, hard to hold, but impossible to ignore. The group listening nods in appreciation, a few even tapping their cups rhythmically in approval, an improvised Ottoman-like button. There's music too. A lone oud player strums in the back corner, his notes so soft you almost don't notice them until the silences between chords ring louder than speech. And yet no one claps. Applause would be too loud, too final. Here joy is subtle, and stories are passed like sugar cubes, quietly with care. A boy brings around a tray of lokum, those powdered Turkish delights that taste like sugared rosewater and regrettable decisions. You take one. It sticks to your teeth, and somehow makes the coffee taste bolder. Now glance up. See that elaborate tile work along the far wall. It depicts a lion and a sun, symbols of power and rebirth. A bit ironic, given that one of the men beneath it is quietly telling a joke about the Grand Vizier's nose. No one shushes him, but you do notice a man near the door who hasn't touched his coffee. His ears are open, his eyes a little too still. Spy, probably. Every coffee house has at least one. Ottoman authorities weren't big fans of these caffeinated salons, especially when the poetry turned pointed or the laughter too loud. One sultan even tried to ban them, claiming coffee made people talk too much. He wasn't wrong. And yet here they sit, talking, thinking, brewing ideas stronger than the coffee itself. Your bench creaks slightly as someone joins the group. He brings news from the bazaar, a fight over melon prices, a rumor about a Persian envoy, a whisper of a new edict requiring beard inspections in court. Everyone chuckles. One man strokes his beard protectively. Another quotes a line of satire that earns him a round of approving murmurs. You let the conversation swirl around you like steam and feel, perhaps for the first time today, that you're not just awake, you're alive, alert, tuned into something bigger, older, warmer. This is more than a cafe. It's a memory palace, a place where thoughts are steeped, not rushed. Here's a quirky bit. Some Ottoman coffee houses employed parrot birds, not for decoration, but to mimic customers' favorite lines of poetry. Imagine that. A lime green feathered heckler squawking. The moon is a slice of melon every few minutes. Probably got more laughs than the actual poet. The hour grows late, but no one rises. Coffee's not just for waking up, it's for staying still, for digging into the depths of thought. And here beneath the low beams, the scent of burnt sugar and the low murmur of thinking men, you find the world at a strange, cozy pause. Outside, the wind lifts faint notes of oud music from a second-floor window where another coffee house is just beginning to fill. But you're staying put. There's more to see, more to hear, and oh yes, more rules to be broken. You're still seated, the warmth of the brass cup now faint against your fingertips. The second round of coffee has arrived, darker this time, richer, as if the sesve held not just ground beans, but a secret or two. Across the room, the air shifts. A younger man, sharp-jawed, quick-eyed, leans in and starts a spirited rant about tax codes. You blink. Is he serious? Oh yes. In an Ottoman coffee house, tax law is table talk. This is where the brew thickens. Coffee houses, especially in the 17th century, weren't just social spots. They were boiling pots of ideas, often with a dangerously open flame. You see, while the court preferred obedient silence, the cafe crowd liked to ask questions, loud ones, over coffee. A group in the far corner is arguing gently but firmly over land reform in the provinces. Another man unrolls a crude map of trade routes along the Danube. There are no official scholars here tonight, just merchants, clerks, and ex-soldiers. But the debates are relentless. It's like a medieval podcast with no pause button. You shift on your cushion, now more alert. A game of chess is unfolding behind you. You glance over your shoulder and catch a glance from the player with the white pieces. He grins. Chess, though beloved, was once banned in these very cafes. The fear it made men lazy, seditious, or worse, too strategic. Better to drink coffee and stare at a wall, apparently. But tonight the game goes on. It's played quietly but boldly, like a secret told too loudly. Every time the bishop moves, it feels like someone's pushing a political metaphor across the board. Historians still argue whether the bans on chess and coffee were genuine moral concerns or thinly veiled strategies to suppress free thought. Likely both. After all, what better way to control dissent than to outlaw gathering gaming and guzzling together? And yet look around. You'd never know these men were breaking the law. They lean back, laugh lightly, discuss translations of Persian texts one moment, and whether the new vizier owns too many horses the next. There's always someone with an opinion, and tonight it's the barber who has moonlighted as a political commentator. His voice cuts clean sharp, a bit too loud. Someone lights a fresh coil of incense. The air sweetens. Even the shadows on the walls seem to lean in. Did you know some coffee houses developed their own coded language? Patrons would drop certain phrases into conversation, a line from Rumi, a proverb about frogs and wells, to signal dissent without drawing attention. Clever, cozy, cryptic. A waiter stumbles slightly with his tray. No one laughs. Instead, a stranger helps him steady the cups, then slips him a coin. Grace is part of the ritual here. Manners matter almost as much as ideas, and that's saying something. You take another sip, and the cup clinks softly on its saucer. The man next to you, a retired janissary with a face like carved granite, offers you a fig. You accept. The sweetness cuts through the coffee's bitterness, and for a moment, you both chew in companionable silence. Outside the street echoes with hoofbeats. A mounted official rides past slowly, lantern in hand. The shadows on the cafe walls tremble then settle. Inside, the conversation dips slightly, as if everyone has briefly remembered they are technically not supposed to be enjoying themselves quite this much. But then, as if on cue, the OOD player strikes up a cheeky tune. Someone claps. The tension softens. Back to the debates. Did you hear a man whispers conspiratorially that in Cairo they use coffee to read fortunes, grounds in the bottom of the cup? He shrugs. My aunt swears by it. She predicted my third divorce. The table bursts into laughter. You smile too, but the idea sticks in your mind, reading the future in leftover sludge. Symbolic, isn't it? In a world where fate often rests in someone else's palace, perhaps the only control one has is over what remains after the last sip. There's a new face by the window now. Young, nervous. He opens a worn notebook and begins to sketch the men around him. No one objects. In fact, a few shift, slightly offering better angles. Who knows, he might be the next great miniaturist. And wouldn't it be nice to be immortalized sipping coffee, not swinging a sword? One man recounts a recent pamphlet he read anonymously circulated deeply critical of a provincial governor. It caused a stir. Some claim it originated in a coffee house, just like this one. Others say it came from a disgruntled scribe in the palace kitchens. Either way, it made waves. Open critiques in a cafe were risky, but written satire that was another level. Some cafes even hid printing presses in their cellars. A bit dramatic maybe, but when ideas were currency, being the first to circulate, a biting couplet was social gold. And yet, not everyone here is a radical or a romantic. A man in the corner is nodding off. Another is simply here to rest his bones. His worn boots kicked out his coffee long gone cold. For some, this place is less a revolution and more a refuge, a place to be among others, to sit quietly, to exist without demands. Even the cats understand. One slips in through the open door tail high and immediately finds a warm lap to curl into. No one questions her. She's part of the furniture. Here's a lesser-known tidbit. Some coffee houses in larger cities, like Edirne or Damascus, hosted mock trials full theatrical events where patrons pretended to sue each other for crimes like overbrewing or monopolizing gossip. Judges wore fake turbans. Accused parties pleaded dramatically. Everyone laughed. And in the laughter, truths emerged just carefully obscured behind the comedy. You stretch slightly. The room has grown warmer, the debates quieter, like a fire burning down to coals. But don't get up yet. There's more to witness, more to taste. And beneath the rising tide of conversation, an undercurrent stirs of art of resistance, and maybe even revolution. You've had your coffee, but the night is still young. You're still lounging there, the cushion perfectly molded to your body now, as though it's grown fond of you. The flickering oil lamps have dimmed slightly, either from the settling soot or because someone forgot to trim the wicks. Doesn't matter. The darker the corners, so the better the stories. From somewhere behind a curtain near the back, the scratchy beat of a hand drum begins. Not a performance, not yet. Just a test of rhythm, as if the building itself has a heartbeat. Then, like rain following thunder, soft flutes join in, and you realize tonight's coffee house has decided to become a stage. One of the regulars, a baker by day, apparently is stepping forward in exaggerated fashion. He's dressed in layers too warm for this season, and his mustache is preened into dramatic hooks. He gives the audience a meaningful glance, then launches into a monologue so grand, so ridiculous, you can't help but smile. The crowd chuckles. It's satire, of course, the kind that pokes fun at palace scribes, pompous clerics, or the man who sells overpriced fish near the harbor. And everyone gets the jokes, even the cat. Ottoman coffee houses weren't just for drinking and debating. They were also the neighborhood's living theater. Impromptu performances, often blending poetry music and slapstick, filled the evenings with a kind of emotional caffeine. You don't just stay awake here, you stay engaged. The players might be shoemakers, imams' nephews, or ex-janissaries, but their delivery is razor sharp. And you, dear listener, are now part of the front row. You shift slightly as a group of dervishes enters, not whirling tonight, just watching their robes dusted from the road. They take seats near the back, heads bowed. One of them is humming a haunting tune under his breath. It sounds like longing wrapped in silk. A nearby merchant leans toward you and whispers that when used to be a court musician, gave it all up after a dream. You nod solemnly, pretending you understand. You don't. But it's late, and in this golden half-light, everything feels symbolic. The drama pauses as a new tray of coffee arrives. It's sweet this time, syrupy even with hints of cinnamon. A reward for the regulars who stayed through the third act, perhaps. The man beside you toasts the group with his tiny cup and declares to failed actors, unpaid poets, and coffee thick enough to stop time. Everyone cheers. Now here's something charming. Certain coffee houses were known by their vibe. Some attracted scholars and scholars only. Others were for military men or artisans or melancholic poets who never looked up from their notebooks. One in Galata was famous for hosting drum battles on Fridays. Another in Aleppo only served patrons who could recite at least one line of classical verse. Tonight your cafe seems to be the all-stars of the odd and lovely variety. There's a lute player who uses his instrument as a prop for jokes. There's a very thin man slowly composing a love poem to his own mustache. And by the window, a woman, yes, a woman, sits quietly under a shawl, listening. Technically, women weren't allowed in most Ottoman coffee houses, but technically, rules bend when no one wants to be the one to enforce them. Historians still argue whether this occasional presence of women in male dominated spaces was tolerated, ignored, or symbolic of changing social norms. But in this moment, no one minds. Her coffee is paid for, her eyes are focused, and she laughs at all the right moments. Someone passes around a plate of candied orange peel. It stings your tongue in the best way, zesty sweet and a little dangerous, like this whole scene. You look toward the far corner where two janissaries are playing a drum duet on the tabletop. Their fingers move so fast they blur. The rhythm pulses like a heartbeat, then halts abruptly. Everyone applauds with two fingers on their cups, no loud clapping, just a subtle ripple of appreciation, quiet pride. Let's drop in a fun fringe detail. In some coastal towns, traveling performers would bring with them mechanical puppets, automatas if you can believe it. These tin contraptions would nod blink or raise tiny coffee cups powered by heated steam and finely tuned gears. Half the crowd believed they were magic. The other half just watched for the jokes the puppeteer whispered when no one was looking. No puppets tonight. But the spirit is the same. Performance as release, as resistance, as routine. You glance back at the dervishes. One of them is now speaking softly to a boy seated nearby, not preaching, teaching. Something about patience and water and the shape of God. The boy nods, eyes wide. Coffee houses weren't just the theaters, they were classrooms. Think of them as a second kind of mosque where sermons were traded for stories and theology sometimes wore a punchline. Education was rarely formal, but it was everywhere. You learned from the man beside you, from the old poet in the corner, from the satirist with the crooked belt, and yes, from the barbers, always the barbers. A strange phenomenon, many coffeehouse barbers doubled as informal historians, gossip collectors, even matchmakers. Don't ask why, just sip your coffee and accept it. There's one more act tonight, a quiet duet between an ahudi and a ney flute. The music is sad but not heavy, like remembering something beautiful you can't return to. The room falls into silence, not reverent, just Bill. Even the jokes take a break. A man across from you wipes his eyes and mutters, "That tune reminds me of the time we lost the orchard to fire." No one asks which orchard. Everyone understands. The air grows denser, not unpleasant, just full of sound, scent memory, and that particular kind of Ottoman melancholy the poets were always chasing like a cat after dust motes. You lean back. Your cup is empty again, the ground's thick at the bottom like black velvet. No fortune teller arrives, but you stare into it anyway. Perhaps it says, "Stay a little longer." There's more to hear. And indeed, there is. You haven't moved for what feels like hours. But time doesn't pass in straight lines here. It curls like steam off a kesve. Outside, the city is fast asleep. But inside this coffee house, the night is only beginning its final act. The candles are lower now, puddling into thick wax like melting memories. Someone has shifted the lamp near your table, casting strange silhouettes on the walls, figures of men, mid-laugh, mid-sip, mid-revolt. Because yes, revolts were whispered here too. You catch a hushed conversation at the next table. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just a folded piece of paper passed under a saucer, a nod, a change in tone. You lean back instinctively. In the Ottoman Empire, coffee houses weren't just hotbeds for poetry, they were occasionally engines of sedition. A lot of uprisings started with a very good cup of coffee. Historians still argue whether the role of coffee houses in actual revolutions was overstated by later writers, or whether the authorities were right to be nervous. But one thing is clear: coffee fueled more than conversation. It emboldened, it clarified, it made people think. And thinkers, as every empire eventually learns, are trouble. Tonight the trouble is subtle. Someone recites a riddle about a great tree with golden leaves, under which men sleep but never dream. It's vague enough to be harmless, or dangerously precise. The whole room listens. No one claps, just knowing smiles. And here's something delightfully odd. Some cafes had shadow corners, sections where regulars who were known to stir the political pot could still speak, but from behind screens or curtains. Think of it like a 17th century VIP section, except the P stood for possibly subversive. A man near the fire clears his throat and begins a new tale. It's about a baker's son who once disguised himself as a vizier to sneak into a palace meeting, only to be caught when he ordered lemon syrup instead of rosewater. The whole place laughs. The story is clearly fiction, but also clearly not. You sip and let the humor settle somewhere beneath your ribs. By now, you're seeing the patterns. This isn't just a coffee house, it's a living archive, a library without books, where the ink is memory and the shelves are human. Everyone here is a page, a footnote, a headline in someone else's oral history. Even the server, silent nimble, could tell you who fell in love last spring, who changed sides in the provincial tax debate, and who owes 3 copper coins for spilling coffee on a visiting poet's shoes. He won't, but he could. From somewhere unseen, a kettle lets out a soft sigh. One more round, of course. This time the brew is smoother, less bitter. Someone's added a touch of honey. It coats your throat, slows your thoughts. You realize now that you're not quite sure where the stories ended and your own began. A soft argument begins across the room, nothing heated. Just a disagreement over who invented coffee. The Ethiopians, the Yemenis, a goat. Someone insists on the goat story. You smile. The truth doesn't matter now, only the telling. Outside, the wind picks up. The wooden door rattles softly, and a scarf left on a bench flutters like it wants to leave. But no one follows. It's warmer here, safer. Did you know some Ottoman coffee houses had mascots cats usually, but occasionally a crow? One famous cafe in Bursa kept a parrot that could imitate the muezzin's call perfectly until it was caught following it with a mocking and bring baklava. It was not invited to stay. The parrot, not the muezzin. The man with the crooked belt is now offering farewell poems. Tiny couplets scribbled on napkins and passed out with a wink. You receive one, drink dark, speak light. Leave your thoughts where the coals were bright. You tuck it into your sleeve, not because it's profound, but because you don't want to let it go. The room is quieter now. The musicians have packed away their instruments. The satirist is asleep, open-mouthed. The dervish who hummed all night has disappeared. You never saw him leave. A final anecdote drifts through the air. Someone swears a friend once fell in love entirely through coffeehouse glances. No words, just shared cups, exchanged nods, and a letter left under a sugar bowl. They married, argued daily, lived to 90, never once made coffee at home. You chuckle quietly, seems fitting. Now you rise finally. Your legs complain, your spine creaks, but your heart, Your heart's full of smoke and sweetness and stories. As you step toward the door, the barista nods without looking. He's already preparing the next sesve. Someone new has entered, already unwinding a scarf, already scanning the room for a soft place to sit and think and sip, and maybe if the night is right, speak. You step back into the cobbled alley. The air is cooler now, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and roasted beans. The noise of the city has faded to nothing, just the faint, irregular rhythm of water trickling in an unseen pipe. The coffeehouse door clicks shut behind you, but its warmth lingers on your skin, in your lungs, deep in your memory. Your footsteps are slow, the kind you take when there's no rush. Above you, the sky has stretched into soft velvet. No stars tonight, just one lazy crescent moon watching like an old friend. You pass shuttered stalls, closed gates, windows glowing faintly behind embroidered curtains. Somewhere a kettle whistles in another house. Somewhere another story begins. But you've had your fill. You're calm now, not sleepy in the usual sense, but rested, as though the night brewed you into something steadier, something quieter. A street cat weaves around your ankles, purring without purpose. You smile and keep walking. Tomorrow may bring noise and taxes and choices. But tonight, you were part of something slower, softer, deeper. A moment where the world didn't need answers, only warmth. You breathe in deeply. The coffee has faded, but its comfort remains. Like a song you can't remember the words to, but hum anyway. And with that hum on your lips, and a hint of rosewater still on your fingertips, you finally slip into sleep.